Good evening. Or shall I say good afternoon?
Good afternoon.
To Reverend Freeman, to our distinguished dais, and to all of you in the house, protocol has been set. But even though protocol has been set, I still want to give reverence, honor, and respect to those, because as you heard Reverend Wilburn say, I've known these folks a long time.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Actually, my roots are in Shiloh. I remember making speeches when I was a child, when Shelley Sampson was moderator. And we would go on our Saturday and Sunday school conventions on Saturday. That would be all day on Saturday as a child. And many times I would represent St. Luke Baptist Church as one of the kid speakers. And so for me, when Reverend McCoy asked me to come to speak today, that brought back memories. And as I walked into the sanctuary, as I walked into the gym and saw all the different faces that I haven't seen in a while, I was just sitting there thinking back to those days and how quickly time has flown. I saw Reverend Medley out in the overflow, and he said, man, time changes how people look. And it does, and time is gone, but we are grateful and thankful to still be here. We really are. And I am thrilled to be here to talk a little bit about what you're doing today in terms of scholarship and why it's so important. And I know when I talked to Reverend McCoy, he said we weren't necessarily looking for a sermon per se, but we wanted somebody who's on the ground floor, who's on the battlefield in education. And it's interesting and ironic that Sister Hyman would sing, "Here am I, send me," because in many times the superintendent would send me to schools and I felt more like Jonah. I did not want to go to that particular school, but he sent me there with the mission of turning that particular school around, hence the school that I'm in now, Reverend Dr. Frank Napier Jr. School of Technology and Science. I was sent there because it was one of the lowest performing schools in the state, and my mission has been to go there and turn that school around. This is my second year there, and things are progressing. They are progressing slowly. It's like turning a battleship instead of a rowboat. Because you know, a little rowboat, you can turn that like that. But a battleship, that takes a long time. Turning some of these schools around is like turning around an aircraft carrier. And that's where we are at Napier Academy. So I want to share some things with you today in terms of why what you're doing is so critical. I'm going to throw some numbers at you, share some numbers with you nationally, some figures. Those of you who are in education, you'll be able to relate right off the bat to what I'm talking about. But I'm going to share some figures with you nationally. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about the theme I know you have is "A mind is a terrible thing to waste," but I've lifted for a title a quote from Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., which is "Intelligence plus character. That is the goal of true education." So I'm going to be working off that, and that dovetails and fits right in to what we're doing here in terms of a mind is a terrible thing to waste. And before I go any further, I'm just going to start off in a prayer so I can get everything flowing in the right direction from this point on. So if you would all bow with me. Our Father who art in heaven, we thank you for this day. We thank you for the meal that we have just partaken in. We thank you for friends. We thank you for family. We thank you for being housed right here in this gymnasium, in this church, in this auxiliary room, right here at Union Baptist Church, dear God. We thank you.
Yes, sir.
And we just ask that you be with us as we continue on with this luncheon. Help us to understand the importance in education and how education and spirituality connects, how soul-saving and mind-saving both connect. Help that message to come through loud and clear. In the mighty name of Jesus, we do pray. Amen.
Amen.
As I said, I know it's not a sermon, but we are in church. And there are some things, there is nothing new under the sun in terms of the Bible. And education is a part of that as well. So there was two passages that I did lift out. And first was Hosea 4:6. And that is, "My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Because thou hast rejected knowledge, I will also reject thee. Thou shalt be no priest to me, seeing thou hast forgotten the law of thy God. I will also forget thy children." Then I want you to turn over to Ephesians 6:12. "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. And again, for those of you who are in education, it's a battle going on in these schools.
That's right.
Satan, rest assured, does not want our children educated. My administrative team and I, all of us are believers. My secretary, all of us are believers. And we get together and we always say Satan is angry because we're coming in this school trying to flip it upside down. There's a whole bunch of chaos that's been going on in that building. Satanic chaos. And I said, Satan is angry that we are trying to right it. And because all of us are believers and because all of us pray, because we keep the Patterson School District and Napier Academy in prayer, and because of that, Satan is angry. Every initiative we try to do is throwing something back at us.
That's right.
So Satan does not want our children educated. So it is a battle. And I tell my teachers and everybody all the time, this is not about you. This is not about flesh. This is beyond flesh. Of what we're going up against in the educational realm. And when I say that, I'm going to share these numbers with you. These are national figures. If you read in my bio, you see that I did some time studying a little bit at Harvard University. I was there this past summer. And one of the presenters that I was there presented these numbers. Matter of fact, I'm using his slides. These numbers are nationally, 2013 results. They're broken out by ethnic groups and by grade level. Grade 4. The percentage of black students who were proficient was 18%. 18% of our black students nationally are proficient on these various state tests. Our Caucasian brothers and sisters are 46%. Our Hispanic brothers and sisters, 20%. And our Asian brothers and sisters, 51%. Now that's in 4th grade. I'm going to read across for 8th grade. For 8th grade, nationally, our black children, 17% proficient. Our Caucasian brothers and sisters, 46%. Our Spanish brothers and sisters, 22%. And our Asian brothers and sisters, 52%. And then by the time they get to 12th grade, by the time they get ready to graduate high school, supposedly they get a diploma that says they've met all the requirements. At 12th grade, 16% of our black children. 47% of our white friends, 23% of our Spanish children, and 47% of our Asian children. And that's in reading. The math scores are really simple. You're going to see. Similar. Grade 4, 18% for our blacks, 54% for white, 26% for Hispanic, 64% for Asian. That's in 4th grade. This is in math. Grade 8, 14%. 45% for our white friends, 21% for our Hispanic friends, 60% for our Asian friends. And then again in the 12th grade, for our black kids, 7% of our black children by the time they get ready to leave high school is proficient. 33% for our white students, 12% for our Hispanic students, 47% for our Asian students. Not one population got beyond 70%. Actually, not one population got beyond 65%. So you wonder, what are we graduating?
That's true.
And this is why education is so important. Think about that. Black folks, us, we didn't get beyond 18% in any category.
That's right.
In either math or reading.
Right.
We didn't get to 20%. That's 1 out of 5. We didn't get to that. That's why what we're doing here is so critical, because we have to support our children. And some will say, well, Mark, why do if the numbers are that bad, why don't you just focus just on the intellect? Because in my building, in every building I've ever served in, I've served in School 6, I've served in School 27, I've served in Arlington Patterson School, I've served in School 10, School 28, and now Napier Academy. Those are the roughest schools in the city of Patterson. And they say, why are you focusing on character as well as the intellect? Well, over the last 18 months or so, and this is going back a couple months, so it's probably 20 months or now the number is probably high. We've had 74 school shootings across the country over the last 18 months.
That's right.
Now, when I was a child going to school, you never heard anything about anybody getting shot in a school. And now you're talking about 74 school shootings over an 18-month period of time. At Napier Academy, my mission in every school I've been in, there's about 3 or 4 schools in Patterson that have the same mission statement because I wrote them. And the incoming principals kept them. So there's about 3 schools. I know school 10, 28, and Napier Academy all have the same mission statements. You can just change the names. Our mission at the Napier Academy is to develop our students' character and intellect in order for them to function successfully in life. Our vision, the Napier Academy, is dedicated to drawing out in an excellent manner that which is within every student, with character and intellect being our cornerstones. At the end of my morning announcements, every morning, every child in my building, we have a mantra. And we want the ground to shake when all those children say it, and they all say it together. At the end, on cue, they say, we are here and ready to learn, build our character, and increase our intellect. That's the last thing I say other than have a good day when I get off the microphone in the mornings. And my entire building from 1st grade to 8th grade say the same thing together. I can hear them in the main office. We are here and ready to learn, build our character, and increase our intellect.
Yeah.
Now, I'm doing that for a reason. Everything I do has psychology behind it. I want that to seep into their spirits. It could be the roughest child in the classroom, but they're saying that every day. Eventually, because words are powerful, eventually their intellect is going to increase, and so is their character. Matter of fact, we have 3 words that are our pillars there. Learn, build, increase. It's on all of our clothing, on our uniform shirts, on our gym suits. Those 3 words are there. Learn, build, and increase. And I told you, I lifted this quote. As a matter of fact, when I wrote the mission statement some years ago, it came from that quote by Dr. King. Intelligence plus character, that is the goal of true education. And whenever I was preparing this, it dawned on me, you know what, I knew the quote, but a lot of times we hear quotes from different people, and we don't know, what context did they say that in? Where did they say that? Where did that come from? So I did some research on what was he doing when he said that quote? And as the research started, I'm going to read it to you. I'm going to take a couple of minutes just to read it because it fits. It was in February 1947. He was writing in his school newspaper, The Purpose of Education, in Atlanta, Georgia. And it says, writing in the campus newspaper, The Maroon Tiger. I'm almost sure the Maroon Tiger, if I'm not mistaken, is Morehouse. I'm almost sure it is, but I'll look that up. But I'm almost sure it was, because it's Atlanta, Georgia, it was probably Morehouse. King argues that education has both a utilitarian and a moral function. Citing the example of Georgia's former governor, Eugene Talmadge, he asserts the reasoning ability is not enough. He insists that character and moral development are necessary to give the critical intellect humane purposes. Dr. King's father, King Sr., later recalled that his son told him, Talmadge has a Phi Beta Kappa key. Can you believe that? What did he do with all that precious knowledge? To accomplish what? As I engaged in the so-called bull sessions around and about the school, I too often find that most college men have a misperception of the purpose of education. Most of the brethren think that education should equip them with the proper instruments of exploitation, so they can forever trample over the masses. Still others think that education should furnish them with noble ends rather than means to an end. It seems to me that education has a twofold function to perform in the life of man and in society. The one is utility and the other is culture. Education must enable a man to become more efficient to achieve with increasing facility the legitimate goals of his life. Education must also train one for quick, resolute, and effective thinking. I deal with children every day who really don't know how to think. It's sad to see. We are prone to think incisively and to think for oneself is very difficult. We are prone to let our mental life become invaded by legions of half-truths, prejudice, and propaganda. At this point, I often wonder whether or not education is fulfilling its purpose. A great majority of the so-called educated people do not think logically and scientifically. Even the press, the classroom, the platform, and the pulpit in many instances do not give us objective and unbiased truths. To save man from the morass of propaganda, in my opinion, is one of the chief aims of education. Education must enable one to sift and weigh evidence, to discern the true from the false, the real from the unreal, and the facts from the fiction. The function of education, therefore, is to teach one to think intensively and to think critically. Our children don't know how to critically think. Now, he wrote this in 1947. This is 2014. But education which stops with efficiency may prove the greatest menace to society. The most dangerous criminal may be the man gifted with reason, but with no morals. That's why we focus on character and intellect. The late Eugene Talmadge, in my opinion, possessed one of the better minds of Georgia or even America. Moreover, he wore the Phi Beta Kappa key. By all measuring rods, Mr. Talmadge could think critically and intensively. Yet he contends that I am an inferior being. And those, the types of men we call educated. We must remember that intelligence is not enough. And this is where the quote comes in. Intelligence plus character, that is the goal of true education. The complete education gives one not only power of concentration, but worthy objectives upon which to concentrate. The broad education will, therefore, transmit to one not only the accumulated knowledge of the race, but the accumulated experience of social living. Dr. King goes on to say, if we are not careful, our colleges will produce a group of closed-minded, unscientific, illogical propagandists consumed with immoral acts. Be careful, brethren. Be careful, teachers. And that was written by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in the school newspaper in 1947. So I found out where the quote came from, but I know what I see on a daily basis. And what applied then still applies now. I was in a fourth grade classroom the other day, and the teacher put on the board an assignment. And the assignment on the board said, you are riding on the bus, and the bus driver stops and yells for everyone to get off. You are dropped off in unfamiliar surroundings. And I want you to describe that for your family and friends. That's what the children were tasked to do. And then she stood. And I could see the looks on the kids' faces that they didn't know what to do. And I could see the frustration welling up in her face. So I jumped in and said, do you mind if I take this over for a couple of minutes? And she said, no, I don't mind at all. So the first question I asked the children was, first off, children, can you help me understand what the word describe means? And they said, yes, it means what it looks like. I said, yes. And they said, what it feels like. Yes. What it smells like. Yes. Was it big? Was it small? Yes, you're right there. So then my next thing I said, tell me a little bit about surroundings. What is that? And they described for me surroundings. And then I asked, have any of you ever been on a bus? And they all raised their little hands. And one girl said, you know what? I had that experience. My mother and I were trying to get to my brother's job. And the bus driver dropped us off 20 blocks too early. And when she said that, the rest of the little class started talking about their experiences. So I thought we were on a roll. I'm like, yes. So now I started walking around because they were supposed to write an essay about this. And I come upon one young man, and his first sentence was, I got off the bus and I felt lose. Fourth grade. So I said, okay, son, let's go through this again. I want you to read that sentence for me. He said, I got off the bus and I felt lose. And I went back again and I said, okay, son, let me read it to you. I said, your sentence says, I got off the bus and I felt lose. Does that sound right to you? He said, yes. And I said, let me try this again. I got off the bus and I felt lose. Does that sound right to you? And he said, yes. I took his pencil and went to erase the E to put the T, and he said, no. That's what we're faced with. That's why we're looking at 18%. Because when they get to these state assessments, now all hope is not lost, because I was also at a school board meeting the other night where 245 children had achieved a perfect score on New Jersey Ask. That's a perfect score of 300. My daughter, she's listed in Narissa, was one of them. She's done it 4 years in a row. So she's done it 4 years in a row. Thank you. Thank God. 4 years in a row, she's achieved a perfect score in math. She's a little mathematician. But what came to me when I was sitting in that, and I've always known it, but God dropped it in my spirit, and this phraseology was, and it's not a judgment, But low-performing homes contribute to low-performing schools.
That's the truth.
High-performing homes contribute to high-performing schools. Yet, when all the blame is cast, it's always on the school, it's always on the teacher, it's always on the superintendent, it's always on the principal, it's always on everybody else. And it's rare that someone will take a look at what's going on in their home. And again, in the community that I serve, in the school that I'm in, most of my children go through more hell on their way to school. The stuff that they have to pass just getting to school. The drug dealers, the prostitutes. There was a shooting in Patterson about a month or so ago. It was right down the street from my school. A young lady, it was 11:30 at night. She was coming home from basketball practice, whatever. She and her little girlfriend, they stopped off at the chicken store. And as she was trying to get in the store, drive-by came through.
Wow.
Most of my students in my school knew that young lady. I knew her as well. Her family goes to St. Luke. Right across from the school that I previously served, School 20. Every day we passed that spot where that child and many others was killed. And then to make matters worse, I looked on Channel 12 News the other day, and one of the boys accused was a student I had when I was teaching at School 6. He's 22 now. So when I tell you this spiritual warfare, when I tell you the battle in terms of what's going on in these schools, and it's beyond us, the flesh, it's there. And for those of us who are believers, it's very clear. Satan does not want our children educated. And that's why what you're doing here today is so critical. Why must we as churches invest in education? Because I know there's a separation between church and state. But I tell you what, you come in my office, there's Bible verses hanging all over the place. I got Bible plaques with verses on there, and I dare anybody to tell me to take them down. And I'm serious about that. Superintendent's been in there, all the folks have been in there. There's scripture verses there all over my office when you walk in there. You can ready to get around. Proverbs 3 and 5, all of them in there. Lead not to your own understanding. They're all posted in. And there's no one going to tell me to take those down. I understand. So there is a role that church can play in these schools. So why must churches invest in education? First off, there's always been a link to education in the church. For our people, when we first learned how to read, the first book we learned how to read was the Bible. When the slave master was like siphoning us off and hiding us and teaching us a few words, they were using the Bible. That's the book that they were using. So there's always been a link. Spiritual growth and education go hand in hand. Somebody said it earlier about whatever vocation we go in, do that to the excellence and the glory of God. Yes, we need our education to be able to do that. I talked about the low-performing homes contribute to low-performing schools. Many churches built or played a role in our historically black colleges. And some of our white colleges.
Right.
It was the black church, in many instances, was used as the schoolhouse. Yes. So there's always been this connection between church and education. Now, the other thing why this is so important, I see that young man sitting there with his hoodie on. I don't know the academy, but I saw it there. And I see a couple other young people around here. But the truth of the matter is, in our churches, and I was sharing this with Reverend Freeman and Reverend Clayton when we were sitting there. Every one of the major changes in this country, particularly for African Americans, the change agents grew up in the church.
That's right.
The change agents were nurtured and supported by their churches. So when it all gets down to it, we don't know if that young man is the next Martin Luther King or not. He's in somebody's church. We don't know within our churches who is the next Andrew Young, the next Barbara Jordan, the next Loretta Lynch, the next Mae Jemison, and yes, and I'm a big fan of his regardless of his ideology, the next Dr. Ben Carson.
Yeah.
We don't know in our churches the children that we're supporting and nurturing what they're going to become. That's why this is so important. And every last one of those people can refer back to something that happened in their church.
That's right.
Along the way that helped to propel them. So what you're doing is helping to propel these children to go to the next. I have a daughter that's down at Delaware State University. She's a junior. And she called me up one day and said, Dad, one of my books is $250. I said, really? Hello, welcome. Now you get to understand what Dad's been talking about. And I'm saying all that to say every little bit that you give helps. Books are expensive. Cheerios are expensive. Pencils, paper, rulers are expensive. Calculators are expensive. Every dollar and dime that you contribute to one of these children's education, yes it does, every one matters.
That's right.
Now the other piece of it is this. I told you, Reverend Medley was teasing me earlier about, I realized it was you. Because he remembers me again when I was in that like 9, 10, 11, because I grew up right next to his brother. His brother used to be my neighbor when I was growing up, so we knew each other very well. Right? So all the people that we looked up to as kids, like I used to look up to the mailman and the bus driver and the teacher and the preacher and all, we are they.
Yeah.
All the people as kids we looked up to, now we are they. So now I got kids looking up to me as, wow, I remember looking up to my principal, Mr. Simon. I remember looking up to my principal, Mr. Ackershook. I remember looking up to my principal, Mr. Klein and Mr. Bradshaw. I remember my teachers, and now we are they.
That's right.
So it's time for us to help bring up the children who one day somebody's going to be looking up to them. A couple of things we as churches can do, and then I am done. Create a team, because this part of the speech is ways your church can be good news to public schools. And most of you are probably doing this, and if you're not, feel free to take the suggestion. Create a team that participates at every school board meeting. You don't have to say anything, but just the fact that your church is there, that's going to send a message. Get a little social action committee in the church, whatever, and go to the school board meeting. Just to kind of put the superintendent on notice. You know, we just wanted, because I'm trying to get my parents in the school to do that. My parents at my school don't know what to fight for. They like to curse, kick, scream, and holler about little stupid stuff. But there are some real issues there, like teacher absences, teachers being pulled out for professional development, all of this testing that's going on with this. There's some real issues that parents need to go to school board meetings and fight, that they don't know to fight for. They don't know how to fight for it. But again, we as the churches, let us start rolling in there, kind of like, oh, I know that's Pastor such and such a church. Yeah, I got to. So get a little committee to start attending school board meetings. As pastors and officers, and I know Reverend Clayton does do this. As a matter of fact, I really like the idea. Get to know the principals in your areas. Make an intentional visit to the school and go meet the principal. And let your children, particularly the children of your church, go to their schools. Let the children of your church know, I'm going to go meet your principal, and I'm going to be checking up on you. I'm going to see how your grades are doing in your school. I'm going to visit that school every now and again just to see how you're doing. That does a few things. That's going to put that child on notice. It's going to put that principal on notice. It's going to put everybody on notice that this child has some support. All right, so get to know the deacons, the pastors, the laymen, the officers. Go to those schools and just say, you know what? You have little such and such that goes to your school. I'm his or her pastor. If I had a child one day, she was cutting up, and she let me know who her pastor was. I said, oh, you go to that church? I know your pastor. Oh, I'm telling you, it makes a difference. It changes. Once you let them know you know either their pastor, or I grew up with your mother, or it changes their behavior. So once you have that leverage, I know your principal. Your principal knows me. So good. As church members, help fund things that go directly to the classroom. And I know as churches we do that. I know we do that. We contribute book bags and pencils on. Keep doing that. Don't stop doing that. It is so needed. You heard Reverend Clayton say whenever he got to St. Luke, I was already there. And this is true. I've only had 2 pastors in my life, Reverend Tyler and Reverend Clayton. I've been at St. Luke my entire 52 years. My mother carried me in her womb at St. Luke Baptist Church. So the entire tenure that I was there with Reverend Tyler, and then when Reverend Clayton took over 17 years ago, we've been together ever since. Where I'm going with that is, Reverend Tyler, in the early time when he was at St. Luke, back in the 30s, 40s, whatever, had a partnership with School 6. Right. School 6 is right across the street from St. Luke Baptist Church. And he would tell us how on the real cold winter mornings, they would open the St. Luke doors to children to come in and get the hot chocolate. You were talking about the news, about the homeless. Reverend Tyler would tell us how they would bring the kids in for hot chocolate on the cold mornings before they went to school. He would tell us how they set up the tutoring program. We're still doing that. We're still partnered with School 6 And we still have the tutoring program. We have reading programs, math programs, computer programs. We need it, believe me, as a principal that knows, and these numbers are correct with the 18%, we need all the help we can give. Schools often lacking in volunteers. Those of you that are retired that can come help read, that can come help just sit and watch. There's some hoops you have to go through with the Board of Education, but they're worth it. All right? Find out the projects that are important to the school and help provide the supplies. In conclusion, we do not have an option not to play a role in the education of our children. For us not to do it is not an option. I told you earlier, Satan wants our children dumb.
That's right.
Make it very clear here. Satan wants our children dumb. Satan wants our children settling for less than who they are. On Friday morning, yesterday morning, when I got, because the same way I'm talking to you now, it's kind of like the way I do my morning announcement. They call it like a little morning sermon. Whenever kids get in trouble, I give them a choice. Do you want the sermon or the suspension? Sometimes they'll say, I'll take the suspension. But the same way I'm talking to you is the same way when I'm doing my morning announcement. It's because I want them to get a message. And one of the things I shared with the kids yesterday is you are so much more than even you believe you are. The things that you're showing us lets us know that you don't even believe you're worthwhile. I've seen anger in kindergartners where they will curse us out and throw tables and chairs, and the anger that's balled up inside of them. So we have got to, Satan is on his job from the youngest to the oldest. Satan wants our children murdering and being murdered because his job is to seek and destroy. If he can destroy our family structures, if he can destroy our children, if he can destroy our fathers, he's got us.
That's right.
I told you, I looked on Channel 12 News, the young man that I had when he was about 10, 11, 12 years old, is 22 now, is being charged with murder of another young lady that, to be truthful, I was there at Nazira. The night we carried her into St. Luke, I happened to be coming out, and Reverend Curitan was coming in. I said, you need any help? He said, man, anytime we got any hands, we'll use it. I helped carry Nazira's body into St. Luke. Went that next morning to the wake, and she was in her band uniform or a basketball uniform or something. It was a sad sight to see. 14 years old and gone. Satan now. So that connection, what I'm saying, all that to say, I got connected between her and one of the people accused of killing her. And when I saw that young man, because one of the worst things, any educators in the room? Anybody in education or have been in here? One of the worst things as an educator is to see a student you've had under your tutelage to come up in the newspaper on the news for something like murder, thieves, being a thief, any kind of criminal charge. That's one of the worst because you know what you tried to do. And yet you see that face pop up. The kid's name is Tyene Mayfield. I'm looking, I said, Tyene? Could not believe it. It's a hurtful thing. But Satan is happy with that. Our children being murdered and murdering. Satan does not want to see us as PhDs and doctors and divinities or MDivs or MSs or MDs or JDs or even being at our best. He is here to seek and destroy. And if he can destroy our minds, back to a mind is a terrible thing to waste. A mind is also a terrible thing to be destroyed. If he can stop the educational process, Satan is doing his job. We need to be on ours. God bless you, and thank you for inviting me. And thank you for what you're doing.
Praise God. So I don't know of any lesson